Whatever happened to the old conservative discipline about paying for what you spent? When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well.
Hi, I'm making this video because recently a political trend has been happening in America. Vice President Joe Biden was down in the polls in the upcoming days before Super Tuesday, but presidential candidates Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar gave Joe Biden their support on the day before the voting began. And as a result, that bump helped Joe Biden win many of the states in the Super Tuesday voting cycle. But if you've been watching politics closely, you know that Joe Biden is unelectable against Donald Trump. He has very questionable campaign finances, and he has a dark political record. But most people don't know that. These last-minute endorsements aren't giving people enough time to think. They're not giving many people enough time to look at Biden and fact-check what he says. This temporary bump, although it's a bump, it's not going to last in the general election. Most people voted for Hillary back in 2016, and look how that turned out. Many people did not know Hillary's dark political record, and most people don't know the truth about Joe Biden either. So what I'd like to do is make a factual argument as to why I believe Joe Biden is not electable and would lose to Donald Trump. During this argument, I'll provide verifiable facts as to Joe Biden's history, video evidence, and I will post the links in the description and the comments. Now, if you are a Joe Biden fan watching this, or if you plan to vote for Joe Biden, I seriously urge you to watch this video. I beg you to hear me out and take this information so you can make a more informed decision as to who will be the Democratic nominee. Because if Joe Biden really is the best candidate and really is electable, surely nothing I say could change your mind. I am making this video because I know that most people are not informed of Joe Biden's record, and I know that most people are not informed of Joe Biden's finances and how that could impact the election. So, if you are a Joe Biden supporter, I urge you to please hear me out, and I hope that you come to a more informed decision. I hope my video helps you be more informed as to who should be our next Democratic nominee. So I will provide these facts to show you why I believe Joe Biden is not electable against Donald Trump. And really, this information is going to be revealed in the general election anyway. If Joe Biden goes up against Donald Trump is going to use this in the election. He's going to use this in ads, and people will see it, and support for Biden will really drop down. So why not settle this now, before you guys vote for him? And, we can see what happens from there. Because we need to show people the truth about Joe Biden. People need to see this before they vote for him. Having him as the nominee would be very dangerous for the Democratic Party. But don't just take my word for it. I'm prepared to offer a list of verifiable facts as to why Joe Biden is not electable. Let's begin. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my argument into 3 main points. My argument being why I wouldn't vote for Joe Biden, or really, why I strongly recommend that Americans do not vote for Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, because he's unelectable and he will lose to Donald Trump. My first point is that Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. Joe Biden has shown many instances of serving big corporate interests over the will of the people, and that could seriously affect him in the general election. Point number 2. Joe Biden would crumple in a debate against Donald Trump. Joe Biden has shown many instances of losing his temper and making very ineffectual arguments against people during his campaign. And this could seriously drive down support. And finally, my third main point is that Joe Biden has a dark political record. Joe Biden has a very strong hold on older American voters. However, his policies are not the best for older American voters. He has fought many times against Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and has supported many deals, many policies that will drive down his support for him in a general election. So with that, I would like to start off with my points. Starting with the first one, Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. My first point I'd like to make is that Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. Joe Biden has a history of showing more interest in supporting big billionaire donors than he does the working class, than he does the American people. And that corruption, although it's not really going out now in media, will come out once the Republicans attack Joe Biden if he's the nominee. Here's a video on Joe Biden's stance when it comes to billionaire donors.
Lobbyists aren't bad people. Special interest groups are not bad people. But guess what? They're corrosive. People who accept the money from them aren't bad people, but it's human nature. You go out, Lynn, and bundle $250,000 for me, all legal, and then you call me after I'm elected and say, Joe, I'd like to come and talk to you about something. You didn't buy me, but it's human nature. You helped me. I'm going to say, sure, Lynn, come on in.
If you call me up after an election, hey, you didn't buy me, but you helped me out. So I'm going to say, sure, Lang, come on in. Okay, this is a big problem with American politics in general, or American politicians. This is why nothing gets done in American politics. Big billionaires give massive donations to politicians, and as a result, those politicians don't take drastic action to do anything that would hurt the billionaire company's profits. This is why we've been talking about wealth inequality for decades, climate change since the early 2000s, and nothing has happened on terms both on Democratic presidencies and Republican presidencies. Why? Because they're bought by big billionaire donors. Joe Biden, when he says that, if you call me up after an election, I'll help you out, he's publicly saying that he's okay with prioritizing them over the American people. Now, if you're a candidate who gets lots of money from billionaire donors, your funding, a large portion of your funding, is dependent on those donors. So if you were to get reelected, you would need them to come out again and support you. And that influences people greatly to not take any measures that would reduce their profits. And as a result, the people bear the brunt of that burden. This is a horrible problem in America. Money in politics, campaign finance reform. With this, people are going to look at this when it gets exposed, and it's likely it will, in a term with Donald Trump, or a campaign with Donald Trump, and support for Biden is seriously going to drop. Now, here's another video that shows young Biden. It basically shows that Biden's always been this way, and his stance on billionaire donors. Watch this.
Senator, I'm sure that you would agree that your service in the Senate up to this point has not reflected any particular concern for the larger contributors.
Well, the fortunate thing is I didn't have many larger contributors, and the only reason, see, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talked about it, but what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son, and so I had to go out. So I had to go to a number of small contributors.
Well, I think we're all grateful, Senator, you didn't take no for an answer.
I have no problem prostituting myself to big donors. Look, if you're an American politician, your job is to serve your constituents. Your job is to serve the American people and fight for policies that your constituents want. But here he is saying that he admits that he looked for billionaire donors first and prostituting himself. What do you think that means? What do you think that means? That means that he's okay with, serving them. I'll do this for you. Donate money to me. Now, many people will see this if it comes out in the general election. And remember, Donald Trump pulls no punches. Like, Donald Trump is not like many of the other candidates. He will not hesitate in exposing Biden's record. And so, when this comes out, people's support for Biden are seriously going to drop down. People are going to view him as a corrupt politician, and they're going to wonder why we had him as a Democratic nominee. And this will seriously hurt our chances, the Democratic Party's chances of beating Donald Trump. Now, this information about Biden's billionaire donors, it's verifiable. This recent article from Forbes shows that billionaire donors are backing, how many billionaire donors back each of the Democratic candidates. And as you can see, Joe Biden has more billionaire donors than any other candidate. And if you look at the numbers, Joe Biden has 66 billionaire donors. 66. This is like one of the main reasons why I'm not supporting Biden. Because even if he promises things, well, if he's bought by all these billionaires, how can we be sure that he can even get stuff done? Like, he makes a point about, I got this done, so I'm gonna get things done. But we have been talking about wealth inequality for decades. Climate change. We have major problems in our healthcare. And we are going to trust Joe Biden. We're supposed to trust Joe Biden to serve our interests and prioritize our interests over the needs of 66 people. Contrast this with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has 0 billionaire donors. That's right. Bernie Sanders has made it a point to not take money from big donors so that he can serve the people. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, aren't billionaire donors necessary for raising money in a campaign? Well, let's look at Bernie Sanders' campaign and see how much money he raised. If you go to opensecrets.org, you can see that Bernie Sanders, without billionaire donors, has raised $132 million. That's amazing. And most of his money comes from small contributions. Now, Bernie Sanders does get money from unions and organizations, small organizations like the Sunrise Movement. So there is money there, but he clearly doesn't get large chunks of money the way Joe Biden does. Now, let's look at Joe Biden, because he has 66 billionaire donors, so surely one would think that he's raised more money than Bernie. But if you go look at it, Joe Biden has raised only $68 million. Basically half of what Bernie Sanders raised. And his support mostly comes from large contributions. In other words, Bernie Sanders has that many more individual people supporting him. And Joe Biden, like, even if he had the same ratio of small donors to big donors, he only has half as many individuals, working class individuals. Excuse me. I don't know what's going on today. Half as many working class individuals supporting today. But since most of them come from large donors, it's less than half. This is a serious drawback. Donald Trump has used donations and campaign finances as an attack against Hillary Clinton, and it has landed. Support for her has seriously dropped. And he's also used that against other Republican candidates who have ran against him in 2016. So once this information gets exposed, Joe Biden is in big trouble. And the Democratic Party is likely not going to win. And Donald Trump will get 4 more years. So this is serious. And this is unacceptable. We really have to pin our hopes on Joe Biden. And most people don't know this. We should be informed of all this stuff. We should know which candidates who to trust, and what their history is of serving the American people. Now, I would also like to show you Joe Biden's history in terms of political honesty with this video right here.
Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania and come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
The problem here is that Senator Biden told his audience he'd just been thinking about these things, and he failed to give any credit at all to his famous British speechwriter.
I was thinking on the way over here. Now, that's a little too much, because, as you point out, what's behind the words? What's there? And a lot of people, the rap on Biden has always been that it's just a surface.
I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, in all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children.
The health of our children.
The quality of our education.
The quality of their education.
The joy of their play.
For the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
He quoted 5 pages of someone else's work without proper citation.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
He was given an F.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
To the political community in Washington, it all seems of a piece. Plagiarism at law school, plagiarism on the stump.
The great communicator. Strike that. The great imitator.
You don't steal verbatim, or when you do, as he did 99% of the time, you give credit.
Biden's critics say he sells himself as a man whose words and visions can inspire a new generation in politics. But if the thoughts, phrases, and visions really belong to others, it's a form of false advertising.
Is it a wise idea, though, to take something that personal, anyway, from another politician and try and appropriate it to your own campaign?
I think it was a stupid thing to appropriate material that was really very personal, that was someone else's.
Most people didn't know who he was, you know, Joe Biden, and now they're going to say, oh, yeah, he's the guy who plagiarized.
That's a lot of people.
Politically, that's devastating.
These clips are devastating. He looks like a Joe Biden wind-up doll with somebody else's words coming out.
If they're going to do things that are stupid as well as immoral, then they're probably too dumb to have the job of president.
Voters are going to have to decide whether he was dishonest or dumb.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and, in fact, ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
And I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Joe Biden was victimized by the truth.
Bye-bye Biden. He may not know it yet, but I think this is going to be very difficult for him to recover.
Is Joe Biden dead meat, yes or no?
I think so.
Bob?
It's in terminal condition.
Terminal. Eleanor?
Yes, unless he comes in third in Iowa.
Morton?
I showed you this video because I would like you to see that Joe Biden has no qualms about lying in public. And look, there's no reason to lie about your college GPA. Nobody cares about that. And yet Joe Biden did it anyway. So it kind of shows you that Joe Biden, like, he kind of lies on a regular basis. Like, you know, it's one thing to be like, oh, you know, I felt bad about lying to him, or I felt bad about lying to her. But it's like, you know, I believe that I have to do this in order to not make the American people panic, you know, something like that. But this is lying about himself, about things that really aren't necessarily, like, there's no good reason to lie about them. So, listen, if people saw this and they saw that, you know, Joe Biden isn't really honest, and remember, Donald Trump will pull no punches and show much of his dark political record, then support for him will really drop down. People will see him, like the true him, when it's too late, after they voted for him in the primary. And so I really, if you're voting for Joe Biden and you think that he's honest, I really urge you to reconsider. This section only has a limited amount of time, excuse me. But I will post more links on Joe Biden's record and his dishonesty and his acts of corruption. The next point I would like to make is that Joe Biden would do poorly in the debates against Donald Trump. The media has propped Joe Biden up to be a real threat towards the Republican Party in terms of the general election. However, if you look at the internet and if you research thoroughly, very thoroughly, you will see that Joe Biden Joe Biden has many instances of losing his temper and providing very non-substantive arguments to people who question him on, like, the smallest things. And Donald Trump could really knock out Joe Biden in a debate if it gets to this. So I would like to show you a few instances where Joe Biden loses his temper and Joe Biden proves that he won't be well suited to debate Donald Trump. One instance would be an example at a rally where Joe called a woman a lying dog-faced pony over a simple question about the Iowa caucus. Here it is.
So you're arguably the candidate with the greatest advantage in this race. You've been the vice president. You weren't burdened down by the impeachment trials. Or in the participation. So how do you explain the performance in Iowa, and why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
It's a good question. Number one, Iowa's a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. It was a little bit confusing in Iowa, number one. But let's assume it was everything was exactly right in Iowa. The idea that you come in with about half the delegates that the leaders come in with in Iowa does not necessarily say how you're going to win Pennsylvania.
Okay. If you're a president, you're going to likely be faced with criticism all the time. It's part of the job. Joe Biden got angry quite easily and attacked the woman just for having questions about, his viability in Iowa. And his argument wasn't substantive. He called him a lying dog-faced, or he called her a lying dog-faced pony. I mean, if Donald Trump attacks Biden on his donors, like if you come out and you get angry and your response doesn't really answer the question, it's more like some sort of like childish backhand insult, it's not going to look well for the American people. He's not going to get many people to come out, and voters who, thought of him as good in the past, his support will drop dramatically. And listen, showing strength is one thing, or showing strength in a debate, you know what? Income inequality is a real problem, and I am frustrated with you supporting these billionaire donors and you serving the needs of them and not helping the American people. That's one thing. That's substantive. But Joe Biden over here clearly doesn't respond, or clearly is very used to responding in a non-substantive way, in a way that makes him look very ineffectual. And people will see this. A lot of people will see this, and they might have liked Joe Biden now, they think he's electable, but really, Joe Biden wouldn't look so good in the debates. And, motivation to vote for him would seriously drop. Another instance is where Joe Biden attacks somebody for questioning him on his climate, or his campaign staff, and how that would affect climate change. Here's the video.
I'm Aaron, and what I'm wondering is, how can young folks trust that you're going to fight for us on climate change when your climate advisor, your hand-picked climate advisor, served on the board of a fossil fuel company?
That is not the person who's doing my advising. And by the way, yeah, Heather worked for us in the administration.
No, I know.
Okay.
But she
look
also
at my record.
Yeah.
Look at my record. Just look at the record.
I have President Biden, Vice President Biden.
Well, I tell you what, if you look at my record and you still doubt about my commitment, then you should vote for somebody else.
I've looked at your climate plan. Why doesn't it ban fracking?
Well, why doesn't it ban fracking? Because you can't ban fracking right now. You got to transition away from it. Look, you're going to ban fracking all across America right now, right?
I would love to.
Yeah, I'd love to too. I'd love to make sure we can't use any oil or gas, period, now. Is it possible?
Yes.
Well, you ought to vote for somebody else.
Again, Joe Biden was very quick to say, vote for someone else. You know what that shows? That shows that Joe Biden is he's so quick to give up on trying to come up with a substantive argument to give to somebody to convince them to vote for him. In a general election, this isn't going to fly. Joe Biden gets angry so easily. So easily. He loses his cool, and he doesn't give an effectual argument. A good response from a politician were to, if he was angry, well, first of all, showing anger to a voter isn't good for a politician in most cases. Showing anger to a candidate is, but Joe Biden's showing anger to a voter, but his argument isn't even like, okay, I'm reassuring you that I'm the best on climate change. He has given up the argument. He's given up the argument. He's very quick to give up the argument because he's not prepared. If you're a president, you have to be prepared for opposition. And seeing, like, this is only a small snapshot of many other clips that show Joe Biden really attacking voters and losing his cool, providing non-substantive arguments against really small criticisms. Here's another one. Here are two more. Here are two more videos to show that.
I got a question I want you to answer. We all know Trump has been messing around in Ukraine over there, holding their foreign aid for them to come up saying they're going to investigate. We don't know. He's no back what we do after that. But you, on the other hand, sent your son over there to get a job and work for a gas company that he had no experience with gas, did nothing. In order to get access to the president. So you're selling access to the president just like he is.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that? No one has heard that? No? You see it on the TV. No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape line, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take the 19 steps. Number two. No one has said my son has done anything wrong, and I did not on any occasion. And no one has ever said it. Not
I
one.
didn't say you were doing anything wrong.
You said I set up my son to work in an oil company. Isn't that what you said? Get your words straight, Jack.
That's what I hear on MSNBC.
You don't hear that on MSNBC. You did not hear that at all. What you heard, look, okay, I'm not going to get in an argument with you, man. Well, yeah, you do, but look, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
It looks like you don't have your backbone in the Trump does.
Let him talk. Any other questions?
Yeah, all right. I'm not voting for you.
Well, I knew you weren't, man. You think I thought you'd stand up and vote for me? You're too old to vote for me.
To support you if you win the nominations. We got to get rid of Trump. But what are we going to do about climate change? Now, you say you're against pipelines, but then you want to replace these gas lines. That's not going to work. We got to stop building and replacing pipelines. You got to go vote for somebody else.
All right, thanks so much, sir. We're going to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'm going to vote you in the general if you treat me
right.
right.
I know. Well, I'm not.
Well, can I have a
Look,
picture?
you're asking a picture of me. You're coming up and telling me you don't support me.
No.
My plan. Yeah, you did. You said
I said I would support you in the general.
In the general. I'm looking for a primary.
We're happy to
and
get a number. We can follow up.
That's what I'm looking for, okay?
Just because we're trying to get.
You believe that Bernie can do something and by 2030?
I'm actually supporting Tom Steyer.
Thompson, well, that's good. He's the guy that did
Thanks
more
so much,
coal
sir. We have a long line right here.
more coal than the entire country did.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We're happy to get
You got the right guy.
You know something? I wish Joe Biden was electable. I do. If we back Joe Biden and he was like, cool, like calm, he has a good temperament, and he's good at debates, that would be one thing. But as you can clearly see, Joe Biden loses his cool very easily. I know I repeat this point, but this is gonna be exposed in a general election. Like, even if he has a bump, like, you know what? Joe Biden is leading by a lot in states like Florida. But that support can seriously drop with these fatal flaws in his campaign. It's these fatal flaws in his temperament and his corruption as a politician. And finally, I would like to conclude this point by saying that Joe Biden forgets stuff easily. And I'm sorry to say this. Like, you know, like I really feel bad in saying this, but people need to see this for a general election. People need to know that Joe Biden makes a lot of gaffes, and that's seriously going to hurt him when it comes to debates and public speaking. I want you to see this compilation which shows Joe Biden gaffing a lot.
Friend, time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday.
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
All right. It's Chris, but anyway.
Chris. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. I love this place. Look, what's not to like about Vermont? One of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe China would join if we put pressure on them. You had people like you had people like the former chairman and leader of the party in Germany.
Go to Joe 30330.
Watch what happened when those kids from Parkland came up to see me when I was vice president. They went into and some of you covered it.
It's not that they don't want to help. They don't know quite what to do. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone. Make sure the kids hear words.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Like, Joe Biden looks like he's really struggling to like try to public speak. Or he looks like he's really struggling to talk. And a lot of people are like that, including myself sometimes. But Joe Biden is running for president. And people need to know this if they want to do great in a general election against Donald Trump. Like, people need to know this. Like, I'm sorry I have to say this. I'm sorry I have to say any of this, but people need to know because we want to beat Donald Trump. And having somebody like that on the debate stage would seriously drive down his performance. The first point alone about his corruption and his lying were already bad enough, but he's going to be worse than Hillary Clinton in the debates. Like, he seriously is very likely to lose his temper and gaffe a lot, and it's not going to be good. Like, this is why I feel the need to post this video, because most people don't know how bad this is. There's an article that says that most people, counter article that says most people don't care about Joe Biden's gaffes. This video isn't about most people caring about Joe Biden's gaffes. This is about people should care about Joe Biden's gaffes, because it will really affect the Democratic Party in the debate stage. It will embarrass the Democratic Party for picking Joe Biden. It seriously will. And it would be one thing if Joe Biden was, a good debater. He used to be a good debater in 2012, but now people need to know this. Because if they're picking a Democratic Party candidate that loses temper easily and, won't do well against Donald Trump, it will seriously hurt our chances of beating him in 2020. The last point I would like to make, and probably the most important, policy. Joe Biden has a horrible policy record. Let's start with the famous one, the one about Social Security. Joe Biden has a good lock, or not a good lock, but a good is pretty dominant among older Americans when it comes to polling. However, Joe Biden isn't the best candidate to support older Americans. Here is the video of Joe Biden fighting against Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Whatever happened to the old conservative discipline about paying for what you spend. When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried. Paul Ryan was correct. When he did the tax code, what's the first thing he decided we had to go after? Social Security and Medicare.
Older Americans rely on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And they have paid taxes to support those policies. So if we were to really cut down on them, that would be a real screw over to older Americans. Joe Biden has a history of going after these social policies, and we're supposed to trust him to be the best candidate to serve older Americans? Like, this is like, the misinformation is unacceptable. People should know this already. And so I really feel the need to make this video to inform people that Joe Biden has a record of going against Democratic policies. Like, Social Security, I was taught in history class, like, is like a must for Americans. Like, if people attack it, that's a big thing. People have paid money to go into Social Security when they were adults, and when they're older, if they try to cut back on Social Security, I mean, what about our hard work from when we were an adult? Our tax money that went into those social programs, is that for nothing now because we're cutting them? So it's things like this horrible misinformation as to why Joe Biden's record isn't very good for Democrats. Donald Trump will carpet bomb the airwaves with these kinds of ads. And support for Joe Biden in his dominant demographics will drop significantly. And that's going to be very dangerous. And voting is only a few days away. So I really urge you to consider this when voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden has also supported a wide variety of other policies that are detrimental to the middle class and the black community. One instance would be opposing desegregational busing, being the architect of the crime bill, supporting the welfare reform bill, discriminatory housing policies, supporting NAFTA, which outsourced many jobs in America. And also, I would like to end this with, he supported TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Act, which would have, it didn't get passed, but would have outsourced many jobs overseas. I would like to show you a video of that now.
The actions taken by this administration, I think, are making it harder for us to meet the challenges we face, undermining our credibility on the international stage, abandoning the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I know, by the way, it's not meant as a compliment in Washington, I'm known as middle-class Joe. It meant that I'm not so sophisticated. I'm from Scranton and Wilmington. But I'm pretty damn sophisticated about why we're who we are. It has been I'm the middle class with aspirations and a way up for people. But today, in order to deal with the problems of fear that occur in much of the heartland as well as back east in the industrial states, we're yielding to all the wrong impulses, walking away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partner Act, is a policy that was not passed, but it would have outsourced so many jobs overseas, and it was a horrible policy idea that would really screw over the working class and help companies. And once Donald Trump shows this, like many people in impoverished communities, like many people who have a lot of working class citizens, are going to be really off-put by Joe Biden. They're going to be less inclined to vote for him in a general election. And so Joe Biden has a horrible policy record. I will provide more links, by the way. Like, this video has a limited time, but believe me, I will provide more links as to Joe Biden's dishonesty, Joe Biden's temperament, and Joe Biden's horrible political record. You know, I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't. But the American people need to be informed before they vote. We can't have another 2016 where we voted for... Hillary was the centrist candidate. Bernie ran against Hillary in 2016, and Hillary was a centrist candidate, and she was deemed as more electable, and more people voted for her. So we're actually almost mirroring what we're doing in 2016. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. Joe Biden, based on these facts, like, I'm not making an argument just based on my own opinions. These are verifiable facts that I will post in the description. And even if I didn't post it, I will post it. But even if I didn't post it, like, you can see the video evidence right there that Joe Biden really did all these things. So these endorsements from Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar has given Joe Biden a temporary bump. But the problem is that people didn't have time to think all that much about Joe Biden. These endorsements happened the day before voting. And so, if more endorsements come Joe Biden's way, I would just like to urge you to please consider Joe Biden's record. And please consider these facts over endorsements. Because endorsements, they're like the legitimized or the socially acceptable way to vote for someone without researching their policies, without thinking about what their impact on America might be. And so I would also like to say that there are two prominent figures who may endorse Bernie or may endorse Biden or may not make endorsements at all. These are Elizabeth Warren and Barack Obama. And I would just like to say something. If they, whether they endorse Bernie, they don't endorse anyone at all, or they endorse Biden, if they were to endorse Joe Biden...
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Argued that we should freeze federal spending. I meant Social Security as well. You didn't buy me, but it's human nature. You helped me. I'm going to say, sure, Lynn, come on in.
They would be embarrassed. Like, they would be embarrassed in the general election. If Joe Biden becomes the nominee, they will be embarrassed. Because, and everybody else who endorsed him would be embarrassed too, because Joe Biden would destroy himself. Joe Biden would, just his public speaking, his policies, when people find out who he is, this would seriously damage Obama's reputation and Elizabeth Warren's reputation as well. So with that, I urge you to consider that even with their endorsement, and even to Bernie. So I urge you to really do your research on Bernie Sanders. Even if they endorse Bernie, I urge you to still look at his policies and see he can pay for what he asks for, and he has a way of getting his stuff done. But I still urge you to research on Bernie Sanders from not just from corporate media, but from his own website, from other forms of media, and get both sides of the story. Because this is serious. We're talking about a candidate who's supposed to be Donald Trump. And so with that, I hope you consider these facts, and probably you can do some research on your own over endorsements. I'd like to say that Bernie Sanders is the better candidate. There's no time to talk about that now. So I'm going to make another video on why I recommend you should vote for Bernie Sanders, but it might not come out in time. So I'll just say this. Bernie Sanders has been massively attacked by the media and corporate interests because he poses a threat to billionaire donors. And so the media is very biased of him. I'm going to give you a compilation to show you. What I'm giving you is an overview of my next video as to why I recommend you vote for Bernie Sanders. So here's the media bias.
Bernie is back, getting into the presidential race. Democrats like somebody new, and that is not going to be Bernie Sanders this time. It's really hard to imagine who the Bernie Sanders voter is at this point. Bernie Sanders, fall back. Please get away from us.
Hey, Senator, great to see you. Thank you for doing this.
He has a kind of gruff, curmudgeon-y side that is, of course, well known. He doesn't actually smile that much.
It's almost like Bernie can't tell the difference between kids and adults.
All right, I think you're dumb. I think you're dumb if you don't sit down and learn how to read and write. No, you were not born stupid. Come here. The only way I think you're dumb, I think when you think you're dumb, because you're not.
He also, I think you're disheveled, you're unlikable, and you're pushy, and I don't think you should be leading anybody.
How old is too old?
I think the issue is, do you seem like you're in the contemporary world? He's a socialist from the 1950s yelling at people in the same screechy voice, without smiling, without any kind of personal connection. He looked like the angry man in the center of the stage saying, "Get off my lawn." And I don't think that's a good look for the Democratic Party.
I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate.
You may have heard the term Bernie bro. The Bernie bro, right? Somebody who's a bit younger, whiter, I think, than the overall Democratic primary.
I'm with my magnificent vanilla brother named Bernie Sanders. That's brother Bernie Sanders we talking about. That's brother Bernie Sanders we talking about.
Socialism has been a manifest disaster.
Alec would still be here today if I had known that I could come to Canada.
Alex Smith died after trying to ration a vial of insulin when he couldn't afford more.
So his idea about, free health care, he has seen the manifest atrocities that have occurred under socialism.
$1,000 got me 6 months of insulin for my son. That is still less than what I pay a month in the United States.
Gloria Steinem has suggested that younger women are supporting Bernie Sanders so they can meet boys.
Hello, Bernie. We lost our condo, got foreclosed on because of my medical bills.
I don't understand young women who support him.
I trust that Bernie Sanders is going to fight for health care and to lower prescription costs.
Of all the presidential candidates, you're the one that I trust.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. You're just giving us hope. Thank you. And we got your back.
I think he comes off as mean. I think he's disparaging.
I don't want to overpromise here.
Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl, and I can't even identify for you what exactly it is.
Bernie Sanders has done nothing between 2016 and today.
Thank you for everything you've done these last few years. You've helped to reset our political discourse, and are demanding that we center our politics around justice and equity. I am hopeful because right now, there is a mass movement of people from all over this country, rising up.
Thank you all very much.
It ain't Bernie, it is us.
If we come together, we will win. People always say, "Oh, you're being too vocal."
Hey, Bernie, you don't have to yell.
I don't feel I'm being vocal enough. We are not being vocal enough. When is enough enough?
He sounds very, very shouty.
Louder. Yeah, we gotta get louder. How many kids are gonna have to make this sacrifice and die? How can you sleep at night?
So yes, if you are a follower of mainstream media on television, I would just like to say that they may not be the best source of information as to Bernie Sanders and his policies. And then secondly, Bernie Sanders can pay for what his proposals are. It says so on his website, and I will provide links as to videos as to how it could get paid. I don't have time to go through them in video, but I will provide the links. And then thirdly, Bernie Sanders can get it done, can get what he says done. He can use the bully pulpit strategy to help to push politicians to vote for his campaign by People's Revolution, and he can change the American economy for the better. All right, thank you. I made this video because I really want, Democratic policies to be implemented. I mean, hey, you know what? If Joe Biden was electable, I'd take him over Donald Trump. Definitely. I would. But Joe Biden will destroy himself. Even if he gets all this endorsement, Joe Biden is Joe Biden's biggest problem. So, I'm sorry. But people need to know this. People need to know the truth. And with that, these are my factual arguments, and I hope that I help you all make an informed decision about the Democratic primary. And so, if I successfully helped you be more informed about Biden and see his corruption and see his political record that is against the middle class and against the black community, and see his potential performance in debates, I really urge you to spread this video to other Joe Biden supporters, and just everybody in America. Just because this is serious, especially in the states that haven't voted yet, like Michigan or Florida, because if people are going to vote for Biden, they should know his record. They should know his chances in a general election. And they should be able to look at these facts and be able to better see both sides of the story. So I really urge you to do that, because this is serious, and a more informed Democratic people will help beat the Republican Donald Trump. We need to do that. And I've made this video because I want to inform people who don't know this about this. And I highly urge you to do the same. Thank you for your time.